know for sure, but Maria, are you doing an introduction or?
The introduction is already in the chat.
Okay, that's new for me.
And if they still have any technical issue, they can message me directly.
Okay, perfect. Okay, then hello everybody and welcome to this class. My name is Birgit Koopse and I'm a brand ambassador for Gelli Arts, and I'm in the Netherlands. And thank you so much for joining. Today I'm going to tell you all about, I will try to tell you all about what you need to know when you are going to start with gel printing. So this is like a real basics class. I'm going to tell you all about how to store and clean your plate, which paints to use, which papers you can print on, how you can create texture, and like all the basics if you are new to gel printing. But if you are not completely new to gel printing, you might learn a couple of things or maybe get reminded of some things that you forgot about and might be helpful for you. So let's just switch the camera to my hands and then I will start explaining some things. So first of all, the gel plate. I have here my 8x10 gel plate, and I also have a 5x7 gel plate. These are the two plates that are most common to start gel printing with. And then it is basically about preference and what you want to use your papers for. So for instance, if you are a card maker and plan on only printing smaller papers, then the 5x7 plate would be big enough for you. But if you plan on doing more like creating background pages for handmade art journals, or if you want to make larger sheets of collage paper, then you might want to use the 8x10 plate. So these two plates, I use both of them on a regular basis. It's not like I cannot say I use my 8x10 way more than my 5x7 or the other way around. It just depends on what I plan on doing. So this is a new plate. I will just take it out of the packaging and show you. This is a new plate. The plastic sheet, the acetate sheet, has not been removed from it. And as you can see, this plate is like completely clear, and it is a little bit, it has a shine. It's a little bit glossy. That is what a new plate looks like. But I can assure you, once you start gel printing, your plate will pretty soon look like this. It will not be transparent anymore. It will not be glossy anymore. It will become a little bit cloudy, and depending on the products you use on top, you will get stains. So if you print with only acrylic paint, which is what I will talk about today and what I will show you today, then this is about how your plate will look. But if you start printing with other products like inks, and especially alcohol inks, which have a lot of pigments, then your plate might end up looking like this. And it is especially the yellow tones in the pigments that stain the gel plate. And so my plates, I have never had a plate that turns green or red, for instance. All of the plates that I use with inks that stain the plate are yellow. And it might look horrible, but it totally does not affect any of your future prints. It does not harm your plate. It will not show up in other prints. It's just stained, but it's not affecting the working of the plate. So don't worry if you get stains on your plate. You can still use it as you did before. But if you plan on doing a lot of printing with inks, you might consider having a second plate, especially for inks. So you have one plate that stays pretty clean and you have one plate that turns out like that one. That's why I have on my shell case here no alcohol ink, as a reminder for myself that I should not use this plate for alcohol ink, because then it will end up like the one I just showed you. Now, about storing your gel plate, as soon as you have removed the acetate sheets from your gel plate, you should not put them back on again, because if you use the acetate sheets, what will happen is that you might get air bubbles between the acetate and the plate. And you can see it a little bit here because of the acetate that's on the plate underneath, that you get these like air bubbles. And the pressure of the air will create dents in the gel plate. And they will show up in your prints. So if you don't want those dents, then you should not use the acetate sheets to store your plate, but instead use a random sheet of copier paper, just general copier paper, and place your gel plate between two sheets of copier paper. And make sure that there are no wrinkles in the paper, because wrinkles can also create dents in your plate, which will show up in your prints. In the event that you end up with air bubbles in your plate anyway, for some reason, you can get them out by putting the plate with the dent down on a really flat surface and leave it there for about 24 hours. Make sure that there's no air underneath, of course, and then they will sink out and disappear from the plate again. So that's how you have to store your plate. And then, as you can see, there's still some paint on my plate, and maybe when I lift it up a little bit, you can see better that I left some, that there's some leftover paint on my plate. Personally, I don't clean my plates unless it's like really absolutely necessary, because they got so dirty that they don't print well anymore, or if I want to do a specific technique with a specific product that requires a clean plate. But normally I just leave these little bits of paint on there because I really like how they add interest to even the first print I do in a printing session. So if I clean my plate, the first couple of prints that I make are, for my liking, too clean, and I like it. I like them better if they look a little bit distressed and a little bit not so perfect. So I like to leave these on. But if you want to clean your plate for whatever reason, then you can either use a wet cloth or a baby wipe to remove any leftover paint that's on the plate, and it will get off quite easily, and you can clean your plate like this. So if it's getting off a little bit harder, or if you have stains on there from, for instance, a dry product like pen pastel that is not coming off with just a baby wipe, then you can also add some baby oil, or any oil for that matter. It can also be like a vegetable oil, like a sunflower oil, or an olive oil or something like that. And you will be surprised how much more comes off your plate when you use the baby oil. And as there is mineral oil already in your plate, it doesn't harm your plate in any way using oil to clean it. So if I use a lot of oil to clean my plate, then I usually go over the plate. After cleaning, I use a baby wipe or a wet cloth to clean off the oil from the plate, because otherwise it might be too greasy. But if I'm not going to use my plates right away again, then I might just leave it like this until my next session. But if I want to use it straight away, then I will make sure that I remove most of the oil. And then I will also use a paper towel. And I don't have a paper towel here. I have everything here except for a paper towel. So I'm just going to use a cloth, a dry cloth, and clean off the, I don't know the word. Make sure that the plate is not wet anymore, because when you roll out paint on a wet plate, it's not spreading as nicely as when you add paint that is has no, how do you say it, fluid, extra fluid in it. So that's how you clean your plate. Another thing that you can do, if you like to clean your plate, is using some tape, like for instance, a clear tape like this, or even just masking tape in any size. And this will also pick up paint from the plate. And there's a little bit left here, so I might be able to show you how easy it comes off with a little bit of tape. So you might think it is a waste of tape picking up the paint like this. And I agree if it's for only a little bit like this. But if you have more paint on your plate, and you can even do it on purpose, and you can pick up more from the plate, you can actually create really nice tape that you can use as a collage material by picking up paint from the plate. But that's a whole other class. So what else do you need to start gel printing? You need a brayer. And I prefer a soft rubber brayer, but that's a personal preference. You can also use a hard rubber brayer or even a glass brayer. But personally, I feel like the soft rubber brayer is spreading the paint easier. So if you have a hard brayer, then sometimes you kind of like slip over the paint. I don't really know how to explain it, but that's a specific feeling that I don't like. So that's why I like to use a soft rubber brayer. And some other things that I would recommend when you start gel printing. So you can use any acrylic paint you like. I will talk about acrylic paints a little bit more in a minute, but you can use basically any acrylic paint. And if you have like the cheaper paints that might dry faster, or don't have a lot of open time and dry quickly on your plate, it might be handy to have something like a slow dry blending medium, like the one I have here from Liquitex. And then you can make sure that the paints that you have a longer working time if you need it. But that's only if you need it. Sometimes you you want paint to dry fast so that you can work really fast. But it can come in really handy. And I also like to use matte medium for specific techniques. So that are two things that I always have on hand. To clean the brayer, I have something that's called Biotex, and that's here in the Netherlands. It's a washing detergent powder that has enzymes in it, and it releases all of the paint from the brayer. So I just take out the roll and put it in some water with the Biotex. And I know if you are in the US, you can use something that's called Murphy's oil, which is also a perfect product to clean your brayer. But when I work while I'm doing the printing, in between, I don't clean my brayer. I just brayer of the paint on some scrap paper that I have on the side. And most of the paint will come off and my brayer will be good enough to apply the next layer of paint on top. Now, what can you use? Which products can you print with? First of all, I think that maybe 95% of the people that start gel printing start printing with acrylic paint. And although there are many other products that you can work with on the plate, and you will discover while you're working on it, acrylic paint is the easiest, probably the easiest one. And I think also what the plate originally was intended for, to do mono printing without a press using acrylic paint. So to make it available for a much larger public audience to do mono printing, because you don't need a press. And the plate was created to release acrylic paint. But over the years, we learned that it's releasing basically any product, and there is nothing, at least I haven't found anything that I could not get off my plate. So if you like to experiment a little bit and you wonder, can I use that product on my plate? I would say just go for it and try. But if you want to be sure, you can go to the GelliArt YouTube channel, and there are a ton of videos on there, including all of the different products that have been used by the Gelli Arts artist on the plate. So you can check if you can use the products and how to use them. But today I'm going to talk about acrylic paint. And although you can use any paint, from the cheapest acrylic paint, like craft paints you can get in the dollar store, to the most expensive ones like golden, I prefer to work with what I would call like middle class paint. So it's not the cheapest one, but it's more like a student quality paint, like a Liquitex Basic. Winsor&Newton maybe is probably a little bit more expensive, but still not the most expensive one. And these paints are really good to use on the plate because they have a lot of pigments. So you will get bright colors. You have to keep in mind that when you do gel printing and you roll out your paint, you get like a really thin layer of paint on your print. So you want the paints to be really bright and really deep to get nice colors. And if you have like the cheaper craft paints, then your colors will be more dull and flat and not as nice as when you pay a little bit more. And in my opinion, the paints that you pay a little bit more for also last longer. You need only a tiny little bit to get the same effect as when you use cheaper paints. So acrylic paint. Then there is also a thing I want to tell you about acrylic paint. So if you use paints that are just a little bit more expensive, like a little bit more professional, like these, like the Liquitex or the Winsor&Newton, you can also see on the tube whether or not your paint is translucent, semi-translucent, or opaque, which can be important. If you want to create certain effects on your plate, you might want to know whether or not your paints are translucent. So tubes from professional paint, and that's from the cheaper professional paints to the really expensive professional paints, show on the tube whether or not the paint is translucent. So if you have a little square, every tube has a little square like this. I hope you can see it. And if you have an open square like this one, it means that your paint is translucent. And if you have a little square, let me find one, like this one here. I hope you can see it. It has it is half full and half open. It means it's semi-translucent. And if you have a square like this one that's filled, a little black square, means that your paint is opaque. So when you do layering on the plate, it might be important to know what your paint is. Personally, I never look at that. I only look at the color, and if I like the color, I use it, and I just go with the flow and let myself be surprised by whatever comes out, because that is really what I like about gel printing, that it's pretty unpredictable. And even if you know exactly what you're doing, your second print will never be the same as your first print, even if you do follow exactly the same steps and use exactly the same paints, you will never get the same print twice. And that's actually what I really like about it, that sometimes you pull up the paper and you're like, oh, this is really not what I hoped and aimed for. And other times you are not so sure and you pull up the paper and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like really beautiful. And yeah, I really like that. So that's for the paints. And then before I start doing some prints, I want to talk to you about the paper, because a lot of people ask me on my videos, what paper did you use? And I can tell you what paper I used in the video, but that doesn't mean that that's the only paper that you can use, because basically you can use any paper you like, from like really thin tissue paper. And this is just some tissue paper that came in like a shoebox. You can also buy tissue paper, especially for crafting, but tissue paper from a shoebox works almost just as well. And what I really like about the tissue paper is that when you use it after printing as a collage material, that the areas where there's no paint turn completely translucent. So you can do collage, for instance, on book paper or on an already colored background, and see the background through the paper. That's what I really like about tissue paper. What you have to think about when you use tissue paper is that you use very little paint, because if you have a thick layer of paint on your plate and the paint really soaks through the tissue paper, it will be really hard to pull the paper from the plate. So it's always better, in my opinion, to use thin layers of paint. You can also print on just regular printer paper, from like the thin paper that you use to make photocopies to the heaviest copier paper you can find, which is almost like a heavy card. And what I like about copier paper is that it's really smooth. It's like what I call a hard paper. So it is it's really smooth, and it's different than when you use, for instance, cardstock, which is a way softer paper. And cardstock, when you leave it on the plate too long and your paint starts to dry, you might tear the paper when you lift it up, and some bits of paper might stay behind on the plate. So in that matter, it's better to use a heavier copier paper, and which is almost like the is very similar to the heavier copier paper, but even a little bit heavier is, for instance, the Recollections line from Michaels, which is blank, a white cardstock paper. And it has, it's available in a lot of different sizes, and even in like folded cards and stuff like that, and like letter size and A4 size, everything, envelopes, tags, you name it, it is available in the Recollections line from Michaels. And this is like also, I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but it's like really smooth. It has no texture at all. It's perfect paper to do gel printing on. But you can also print on, for instance, watercolor paper. So here I have some watercolor paper. And as you might be able to see, I don't know if you can see it, but it has some texture. And personally, I'm not the biggest fan of printing on watercolor paper because of the texture. In the lower parts of the paper, you might not pick up paint from the plate, which means that there might be little white spots all over your print, which is the texture in the paper. And some people love that, and it can give you like a really distressed feel. But I like it when my layers are smooth. So I'm not a fan of watercolor paper, but you might love it. So I would definitely try all different kinds of paper and see what you like best, because it's really personal. And then, of course, you can also use paper that already has something on it, like book paper, music paper. You can even print on wrapping paper with patterns, or you could even use magazine paper to print on. Whatever paper you can get your hands on, you can basically print on. The only thing that I would not print on is photo paper. And then I mean the photo paper that you use to print your own photos, which has a coating, like a gloss or a matte coating, and the coating might stick to your plate, and when it's stuck to your plate you will not be able to get it off. So that's the only thing that I would not print on. But other than that, you can print on any paper, and you can even print on fabric, or on wood, or on acetate, or on Yupo paper, or anything you can think of, you can print on. So just play and try. So now, of course, I want to show you some printing. And in gel printing, it's all about texture, creating texture and building up layers. So I'm going to print on the, let me see. I think I will just start with printing on regular copier paper, and it might be handy if I take a little bit bigger sheets so I can cover my entire plate. And then for textures, there are a lot of things that you can use to create texture, and I have a whole bunch here. And the ones that I have here are basically found or handmade textures. So you might think that gel printing is expensive, which isn't really true, because once you have a gel plate, you will be able to find textures all around you, and you don't have to spend any money on textures if you don't want to. Of course, you can buy all kinds of things to print, like stencils or stamps, or art printing plates, or texture plates, or whatever, but you can very easily create your own textures. For instance, by gluing buttons to a piece of cardboard, or tile spacers. These are used to create the space between tiles. When you go tiling, you do tiling, you can just glue a lid from a milk can or a juice can to a cork, and have a circle and a ring to print with. Pieces of lace give beautiful texture. Simple things like bubble wrap or punchinella. Punchinella is actually the material that's left over when they are manufacturing sequins. So it's also called sequin waste, and you can just buy it online. Bigger bubble wrap. One of my favorites is like a blister pill strip. And if you are lucky enough to not need any medication, then you could use like chewing gum strips. They work about the same, or maybe you have somebody in your family who can provide you with some pill strips. Packaging material like parts of a cardboard box, old letter templates. This is one I used to use in school. How about an egg carton? There are many different egg cartons, and I'm pretty sure some of you will now go to the supermarket and look at the bottom of the egg carton to see if there are different shapes that you can use. They are really fun to print with. Lego to create little dots, really fun. Another piece of cardboard. I have some handmade templates here, which is another class that I think I actually did for Michael's already. So you can find that on the GelliArt YouTube channel, how to create your own texture plates from foam, and so on and so on. So we have all kinds of texture here. And I'm just going to show you a couple of them.
Okay, but before you do, we have one question.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Who is asking? Let me read it. They're asking, Patricia is asking, can gilding flakes be used? Do you have any experience with gilding flakes?
Is that like the gold leaf? Oh, gilding plates. Plates or flakes?
Flakes.
Flakes, like the gold leaf, the really thin gold. Okay,
Yes.
so
Yes.
I would not put them on the plate directly because it's a dry product and you can't pull the dry product from the plate unless you add a layer of paint on top. But what you can do, for instance, if you do the tape transfer, where you pull up paint from the plate, dried paint from the plate with a clear tape, then you can add the flakes in the open areas. And then when you turn it around, you have like these little bits of gold in between the paint on your tape, which gives a really, really nice effect. Mm-hmm. But no, I would not. I've tried it once in combination with alcohol ink to use the flakes on the plate, but it was not successful. It's not that you ruin your plate or you can't clean it anymore, but it wasn't giving me a nice print. So I would do it afterwards.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let me start with some printing. So first I'm going to create a first layer, and I'm just going to apply some color, and I think I will start in the first layer with two lighter colors. I have a light pink here and the yellow, the cadmium yellow, and I'm just going to roll out. And as you can see, I'm using only a tiny little bit of paint because I think you get nicer prints when you use thin layers of paint instead of the heavier layers, because your paper will only pick up the top layer if you have like a really thick layer of paint, and that's not making your prints any more beautiful. On the contrary, I would say if you have a thin, even layer of paint, your prints will turn out nicer than when you have a thick layer of paint. So how do you know if you use the right amount of paint? Basically, you can say if you pull up the paper and your plate is clean, or at least almost clean, then you used the right amount of paint, because then all the paint was picked up by the paper. So if there's a lot of leftover paint on the plate, then in general, I would say you use too much paint. So now I have a first layer, and I like to work this way by starting with a solid layer of color, because then I can print another layer on top and use a texture in that. And then in the open areas, I will see the color of my first print. So if I would start doing texture in my first layer already, the open areas would be white, the white of the paper. And although I do like white in my prints, I would like it to be the white of paint and not the white of paper. So that's why I start with a solid layer of color. And then I can add contrasting colors on top in my next print. So I'm just going to, and I'm going to work in stages. So I'm not going to do the entire plate right away, because I'm just going to do a couple of different textures in different colors on the same background. So I'm rolling out my paint. And as I said, I want a thin layer, and I have a little bit too much paint right now on my brayer. So I could either just roll it out over the rest of the plate, but that's not what I want, because I only want this area. So what I do in between, I roll off my brayer on my scrap paper. And then when I go over my paint again, I will pick up some paint from the plate again on my brayer, taking it off the plate and then rolling it out on my scrap paper. So I use my scrap paper a couple of times, adding color, and at some point this will also become a collage material. So I can stamp on top of it. I could even print on top of it, already having a colored background, or I can make it a background in my art journal, or I could do all kinds of things with it. So let's start by taking the air carton. So I'm just going to press it down in the wet paint, then lifting it up, and lifting up the air carton is going to remove some of the paint on the plate. Now I can leave it like this, but I can also just put it down again in an area where there's no paint on the plate and kind of move the color. So this was almost dry already, so you can hardly see that I put it down here. But sometimes when you have a little bit more paint, then you can actually repeat the pattern, like a negative and a positive of the same pattern next to each other. So I always try that. I always put it down next to the paint to see if I can get some paint off of my texture tool. So now I'm just putting down my paper on top, and I rub it well. And here I have my first bit of texture. And as you can see in the open areas, the color of my first layer shines through. Now here's a little bit of paint left behind on the plate, and that's because this was so thin, and because I didn't pull it right away, this had time to dry. Now what can I do with dry paint on the plate? There are different things that I can do. I can just leave it on and it will show up in one of my next prints. I can take some tape and get it off the plate, and I will have a fun texture on my tape, to which I can add some more and then use my tape as a collage material. Or I can apply a thin layer of paint, or for instance a matte medium, on top of the dry paint and pull it. So if I would put a new layer of paint on this to pull it off, then the new color of paint would totally cover my the yellow on my first print, because it's going to cover the open areas of this, and then it will also cover the yellow in here. So if I would like to pull something from the plate that has already dried on an already colored background without changing the color of the background, I can use a matte medium. So a matte medium is basically the same as an acrylic paint without the pigments. So it has the same I don't know the English word. It does the same as an acrylic paint would do. So if I roll out the matte medium, I can pull the paint from the plate without changing the color. The only thing that I have to think about is that the matte medium is a little bit thinner and has a longer drying time than the acrylic paint. So if I use too much of it, or if I pull up the paper too soon, it will not pull the paint. So I have to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more patient when I use the matte medium, but that's something that you will experience quite quickly when you start using it. But I think I used the right amount of matte medium. And here you can see that I pulled up all of the paint that was left on the plate. There's nothing left on the plate, and I didn't change the color of my background. So that's, I think, a good tip if you don't want to use acrylic paint to pull something from the plate.
So Birgit, somebody has a question that they're saying they're having problems pulling dry paint off with another layer of paint. She says it just doesn't pull it off. She's tried everything, and then she ends up pulling it off with tape. So maybe you can talk about different paints, because all paints don't work the same. All the different ways.
Well, I think actually, I think if you talk about acrylic paints, that all acrylic paints kind of work the same. Some are maybe a little bit harder to pull than others, especially when they are dry. But let me show you. I'm just going to try. If I use a really thin layer, I might be able to have it dry really quickly, and then I can show how you can pull the dried paint from the plate. I have to say that if you have a lot of dried layers on the plate, so the thicker the paint on the plate is, the harder it is to pull it off. So if you have like really thick layers of paint around the edges, for instance, that is like several layers dried in previous prints, then you probably will not be able to pull all of that paint like in one with one layer of wet paint. That's going to be hard. But if you have like a single layer, or even 2 or 3 thin layers of paint like I'm creating here, then you should be able to pull it. But there are a couple of things that you have to keep in mind when you want to pull dried paint from the plate. And I'm just going to leave this to dry while I talk a little bit more, and then I'm going to show you how to do it. So first of all, if you want to pull dried paint from the plate with another layer of acrylic paint, you have to make sure, and I can't say it enough, that the layer of paint you're using is really, really thin. If you have a thick layer of paint, you will not be able to pull the dried paint from the plate, as the paper is only picking up the top layer of that paint. It has to almost kind of glue the paper to the plate. It has to be so thin that the paper almost gets glued to the paint plate, so you can, like a vacuum or something, just pull it off, and it will also take the dried paint. So if you are not successful in pulling dried paint from the plate, like rolling out paint, putting the paper on, lifting it up, and not everything is coming up, you can choose to let the paper on the plate until everything is completely dry. And what's important in that matter is that you don't use like the softer cardstock, because the softer cardstock will just tear and leave the layer of paper on the plate. But if you have like the harder paper, like the copier paper, I think Marcia does not agree with me, but oh yeah, she does. Okay. Yeah.
No,
so
I think we're thinking of another question that just came in.
Okay. Marcia was looking like, I don't know.
I know. We're gonna ask you about this one in a minute.
Okay.
So keep going.
Okay. Yeah. Then I keep going with this. So if you have like the softer paper, and that also goes for instance, like all the book paper like this, it's a really soft paper. It has like a texture. It tears very easily. That paper might stick to the plate. And then when you try to lift it up, you will have bits of paper left on the plate. So in that case, I would not leave my paper on. But if you work with copier paper or the recollections paper, for that matter, that I talked about before, you can leave it on the plate until everything is completely dry. And once it is dry, you will for sure pull all of the paint from the plate. It just requires a little bit of patience. So if you are not patient, you have to find out the exact right amount of paint to pull it right away. But if you have a little bit more patience and you want to make sure, absolutely sure, that you pull up all of the paint, then leave the paper on to dry. And even if you leave it on for a day or even longer, you will be able to pull that paper from your plate and you will take all of the paint with it. So I'm just going to show you, yeah, this is dry. I'm going to show you how to pull this, and I'm actually going to do one I'm going to pull right away, and one I'm going to leave on to dry while I'm answering the next question. I think that's a good idea. So I'm just going to use, what color am I going to use? I think, let me see, something like a bright aqua green. And I'm just going to roll it out. And as you can see, it's a really thin layer. You can see the first layer shining through. And I'm going to put a piece of paper on this side and one on this side. And this one I'm going to leave on to dry completely. And this one I'm going to pull right away. Now you can see some of the paint is staying behind. And that might be actually because I did what I said and used a really thin layer of paint, but on this side I didn't use enough paint. I don't know if you can see it, but it's not like there's a lot of blue paint left on the plate. So there actually wasn't any blue paint. And if there's no paint, you cannot pull, right? So this came off pretty okay because of my thin layer. Here I used even too little paint. So it is really a matter of trying and experimenting, because the amount of paint is even different for any brand. So your brand of paint might need a little bit more or even a little bit less paint than the brand I'm working with. And also the circumstances in your room might be different. It might be drier in your room, or warmer or colder. And that will affect also the drying time of your of your paint and the amount of paint that you use. So I can't say a specific amount of paint that you should use, because that all depends on where you are and which paint you use. But I'm just going to leave this one to dry completely, because I want you to see that if you do it this way, you will definitely pull up all of the paint, unless you didn't use enough paint, of course, but we will see when this comes off.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes, absolutely.
So Abby asked, when making layers, what is the order of the layers? If you have a specific design you want to see on top, do you put it on the plate first or last?
Yeah, so you have to imagine that the layers on your plate are the same as when you would stack a couple of sheets of paper. So I put, what I will do, I will actually take this one as the first layer. So I put it on my plate. This is my first layer. Then I put another layer on top and yet another layer, and I could do as many layers as I want. But once I pull the print and I turn it around, the first layer will be the top layer of my design. And with paint, it's exactly the same. So in this matter, if you want to build up layers on your plate and create texture in there, you might want to look at the opacity of your paint. Because if you use an opaque paint for your first layer and you make a solid layer, then the layers you put on top will not show or not show enough when you pull the print, because then your first layer, your top layer, will just cover everything you put on top. The only way of printing where it's different is when you use clear tape, because if you build up layers on your plate and you pull it with clear tape, then actually what you see is what you get. Because then when I pull up the paint like this, what I see here is also what I see when I have pulled up my tape. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense.
Sorry, I was answering another question.
Okay, good. Okay, I think this
I'm
might
sure
be right.
It was great.
Okay, well, I hope our students think the same. But here I'm pulling up the dried paint from the plate, and as you can see, I have a perfect print. Everything came off the plate. Nothing is left here. So for the person who asked about pulling dry paint, this might be an option for you to be able to pull dry paint anyway. And then there was another question, I think.
There was. Well, here's another question, but it'd be fun to hear your point of view, which is, how do you store your plates? Does it matter if you store them flat or hanging up? And I said either is fine, because they hang in retail stores all the time and they're perfectly fine. And I lay them flat on our table and they're fine. So what do you have a preference?
I store them actually standing up, so I don't hang them, but I have them standing next to each other against the wall, so I can go through them like, which one do I want to use today? At first I thought that might what could happen was like it would like sink down, or how would you say it? So I imagined that the plate would be in the end thicker at the bottom than it would be at the top, right?
Yes.
That never happened.
Right. It won't happen. That won't happen.
It doesn't happen. It just won't happen. What I did have, and that's probably my own fault, but when I lay them flat, and I have several, so I stack them. I just don't have the room to put them all next to each other, right? And I once had that because of the weight of the different plates on top of each other, the clamshell thingy of the lower one kind of pushed into the plate, and I got these like dents in the plate. And that's why I would not, that's why I don't store them lying flat anymore. But if you have like only one or two and you have the space, you should just never put something on top of the plate. Not even like this. If I would put this on here and leave it there like overnight, you will definitely see the circle tomorrow like pushed into the plate. So you should never put anything, leave anything lying on the plate. I have seen people like in classes when they were done or taking a break, putting their brayer on top of the plate like this. I would never do that. You should never do that, because it might not look heavy, but it does have, it does press into the plate, and you will end up with dents in your plate that you will see in your prints. So that's maybe the most important tip from tonight, that you don't ever put anything on your plate, and not even like a sheet of paper or something like this. It will sink in the plate. If you leave it on there long enough, you will see the lines of a sheet of paper in your plate. So always either leave it like this or put it in the clamshell with between copier paper.
Yes, and somebody just said, it looks like you always store them in a clamshell. And if you have a clamshell, I would say, yes, you should store it in the clamshell, cover it with copy paper, and then put it back in the clamshell just to protect it.
Yeah, that would be the best way. I have to admit that I don't always, because most of the time, I mean, I gel print basically like almost every day. So it's on my desk and it's there like almost permanent. And I leave it there because I come back tomorrow and use it. And if I don't come back tomorrow, I will come back the day after and use it. It's just when I switch between plates, I will put this one back in the clamshell. And when I, for instance, work with the smaller plate for a time, then I will put this away. But if it's like on my desk, then it just stays on my desk like this. You might consider putting a sheet of copier paper on top while you're not working with it. But one more thing that I just want to point out before I finish is that, as I said, I like to leave these bits of paint on there. So when I'm done for today, I'm just going to put everything aside and I'm just going to leave the paint on. And when I come back tomorrow and pull my first print, these bits will show up in my next print. That's totally fine to leave that paint on there, and it will come off no matter at what point you come back to print. But I would not put it in the clamshell like this. I would not put it between the copier paper and in the clamshell, especially if you have 2 or 3 on top of each other, because leftover paint as paper or anything else can create those dents in your plate too. So if you have like a little bits of dried paint, like a little, I would call it like beads of paint or something, hard paint, and you put pressure on there, or you put the paper or the clamshell on there, they will also press into your plate and they will also create little dents. And so it's okay to leave the paint on, but then do not put it in the clamshell if you leave the paint on. That would be my advice. So are there any more questions? Because I think I shared about everything for the very basics and what you need to do, how you need to take care of your plate and how you can start printing. Oh, there was one thing that I wanted to say. You can use both sides of your plate. It doesn't matter which side you use. So if I would come back tomorrow and I want to do a specific print where I don't want that paint to show up, what I can simply do is turn it around and print on this side. until I'm ready to use the paint that's on this side. So you can definitely work on both sides. So are there any questions?
Well, somebody just asked, when are we planning more classes? So you can talk about the upcoming classes.
We are definitely planning more classes, and I don't have in my head right now, but I think we have one already in 2 weeks. Is that right? In
Yes.
2 weeks?
Yes, yes.
And I don't remember what it was about. Oh my gosh, I should have written that down before I started the class. Marcia is thinking.
I'm looking, hold on.
She doesn't know. On January
was
something
23rd.
23rd.
It was with pen pastel and little portraits.
Oh, I know now. Okay, what we are going to do is it's a great class for advanced printers, but also for beginners, because it's actually really easy. We're going to use alcohol markers to trace images and then color them with pen pastel. So it's a really fun, it's like a really mixed media gel printing class. So that said, I hope to see you in that class in 2 weeks. I hope you enjoyed today. And that's it for today. So have a nice day wherever you are, and hopefully see you again in 2 weeks. Bye-bye. Bye.